to make up for the deficit created by the previous national government.
Investigators in central Russia say a gunman who shot dead 15 people in a school was wearing a T-shirt emblazoned with a Nazi swastika. 11 children were among those killed in the city of Izhevsk. The BBC's Caroline Hawley reports.
The authorities say the gunman was a former pupil at the school who'd shot at a security guard to get in. Other video posted online shows terrified children and adults running through corridors and on stairs, and pupils hiding under their desks. Most of the dead and injured were shot, but one report said a child had broken a leg, jumping from a window to try to escape. The attacker, a local resident in his 30s, is reported to have had 2 specially adapted pistols and plenty of ammunition, inscribed with the word hate.
The Kremlin has admitted mistakes were made in its drive to mobilise Russian army reservists to fight in Ukraine amid growing public opposition. Media reports say people with no military experience or who are too old or disabled are being called up. President Vladimir Putin announced what he described as partial mobilisation last week, saying 300,000 reservists would be called up. However, reports suggest up to 1 million people could be involved. The mobilisation decree has already triggered widespread protests. Mr. Putin says mistakes have been made, but they will be corrected. Air New Zealand continues to struggle with teething problems on its direct flight from New York to Auckland. Since it launched earlier this month, Flight NZ1 has had to reduce weight many times so it could load extra fuel needed to get through unusually strong winds. Lauren Crimp reports.
Flight NZ1 landed in Auckland yesterday with 15 fewer passengers than first intended. Air New Zealand says they were asked to get off so the plane could top up on fuel to avoid a stop in Fiji. It removed many passengers' luggage on the first ever flight for the same reason. Aviation expert Irene King says despite the issues, long-haul routes are key to the tourism industry's future. She says things will stabilise when the weather calms and as the carrier learns from operating the route.
A search is still underway after a shooting in Napier left one person in a serious condition yesterday. Emergency services were called to the scene near the intersection of Tate Drive and Lamison Street about 1:15 in the afternoon. Police say one person has a leg injury and St John has confirmed they are in a serious condition. No one has been arrested. Consumer New Zealand's chief executive has labelled some property agents' tenant application requests intrusive and invasive. An investigation carried out earlier this year by Consumer NZ found 6% of 32 property agencies contacted asked for a bank statement to be included in a rental application. Chief Executive John Duffy says the practice is especially concerning when landlords already have access to a tenant credit system.
That's pretty invasive and it's pretty demeaning, to be honest, to have a property manager trawl through your intimate banking information and make a judgment call about whether you're a fit and proper person to be tenanted in a property.
John Duffy says it also breaches Privacy Commission guidance and is a likely breach of the Privacy Act. People in Florida are scrambling to set up sandbags and stockpile emergency supplies as the US state braces for Hurricane Ian. It's expected to bring damaging winds, torrential rains and powerful storm surges later in the week. The approaching storm also forced NASA to roll its giant moon rocket off its launch pad in Florida and back to the assembly building to protect the vehicle. That's the news. With sport, here's Joe Porter.
Atamarie. The WBC World Heavyweight Champion Tyson Fury has called off his proposed Battle of Britain bout with Anthony Joshua, saying his compatriot hasn't signed the contract before today's deadline. Fury had challenged Joshua earlier this month, saying he would come out of retirement to defend his title in December, a challenge Joshua's camp said they had accepted. Meanwhile, former boxing world champion American Floyd Mayweather has agreed an exhibition bout against British YouTuber Deji in Dubai in November. The all-white star Chris Wood believes the current group of players has the potential to achieve more than any other New Zealand men's side. Despite losing both last week's matches against Australia, a youthful all-whites team were more than competitive with the World Cup-bound Socceroos. Wood says the squad has the ability to achieve unprecedented things.
This could go beyond even the 82 team, 2010 team. They've got the playing style, the knowledge. We've got A lot of players playing in Europe now. They're playing the trade in some of the best leagues around the world, and it's only going to improve and help us as a squad. So I believe that with help and guidance, this team could be very good come 4 years' time.
Wood says it would be a huge mistake to let head coach Danny Hay go, and says the whole team want him to stay on in the job. Hay's contract is due to expire at the end of next month. The All Blacks coach Ian Foster believes they're a mentally stronger side than they were at the start of the season, when they lost 3 of their first 4 tests to put his job under threat. The Bledisloe Cup winners beat the Wallabies at Eden Park over the weekend to defend their rugby championship title.
We've proven to ourselves that we can climb through some adversity, and there'll be more to come. That's what international rugby is about. But, I'm just proud of the way the team's dealt with the pressure of not performing to the level that we want, and the pressure that comes with that, and, hasn't sulked about it and just got them to work.
Around a dozen All Blacks will turn out for their NPC sides over the next 2 weeks, but the rest will take a break until the squad for the Northern Tour is announced in a fortnight. Koina ngā purongo hakina kina.
I'm Catherine Ryan. On 9 to noon today, Andrew Roth, long-time Moscow-based journalist, on the turmoil in Russia after President Vladimir Putin's announcement of partial conscription. Why we need to combine disease surveillance and climate modelling to preempt future pandemics. Aussie all-rounder Nash Edgerton, writer, actor, producer, stuntman and director. And our political roundup with Tim Hurdle and Neil Jones. Join me on 9 to noon on RNZ National.
Now the forecast from Met Service to midnight for Northland, Auckland, Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Gisborne. It's partly cloudy with isolated showers, clearing from Auckland by afternoon. Waikato to Taranaki, including Taumarunui and Taupō. Also Hawke's Bay, partly cloudy. There's late drizzle in Taupō. Taihate, Wairarapa and Whanganui to Wellington fine. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury mainly fine with high cloud. A few late showers in the Nelson Ranges. Buller, Westland, Fiordland and Stewart Island have a few showers, but there's rain in South Westland, Fiordland and Stewart Island at first. Otago and Southlands, partly cloudy, a few showers in Southland and Clutha, spreading elsewhere from afternoon. And the Islands, cloud at times. In the main centres, Auckland, partly cloudy today with a few showers, becoming confined north of Orewa in the afternoon. Fresh northeasterlies easing in the evening, 18 degrees. Tauranga has some cloud and a few showers, easterlies and 16. Hamilton partly cloudy with the chance of a shower in the afternoon. Northeasterlies easing in the evening, 17. Wellington fine apart from morning cloud, northerlies 16. Christchurch mainly fine with high cloud, northerlies and 20. Dunedin mostly cloudy with the odd shower in the afternoon and evening, light winds and a high of 18. This is RNZ National and it's almost 10 minutes past 8.
And you're listening to Morning Report. Time now for another of our mayoral debates ahead of the local government elections. 2 candidates top the polls for the Christchurch mayoral race. Phil Mauger and David Meates. Current councillor Phil Mauger is ahead with a Kantar poll this month showing he was preferred by 58% of the voter base. David Meates was at 26%, but with 38% of respondents unsure, there is still the opportunity to win the mayoralty. The key issue for the regions include the likes of the national housing density rules, the Three Waters reform, fluoridation, and of course the new Christchurch Stadium, almost a decade in the making. Well, Phil Mauger and David Meates join us now. Kia ora, good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning, young fella.
All right, yes, young fella. Well, I might start then with a question a little bit about the two of you and where you sit in terms of the political spectrum. I know you're both a bit reluctant to talk about that, but let's get this on the record if we can. David Meates, you are standing as an independent in this race, but I've read that you would be what? To the left? Are you a Labour-aligned candidate? What are you?
Absolutely not Labour-aligned, and sit very much in the kind of the middle of the political spectrum. And with my background of working or leading the District Health Board in Canterbury for over a decade, one of the things that you have to learn to do is to work with everyone from every side of the political spectrum. And you don't get to choose who you work with, and so you've actually got to work with whoever and whatever the population decides they're going to elect.
All right, Phil Major, where do you sit on the spectrum? You also say what, centrist or centre-right, pro-business? Just give me a sense.
I'm certainly centrist. I have run a family business for 45 years, so I know. I wouldn't say know everything about business. No one ever does, but I do know how to run a business, and we've done very well. And it's time for me to put my neck on the block and give back to Christchurch.
Fair enough. Now, I think it was you who just called me a young fella, was it?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, that's a good question to ask to start with you. What is in your policies for the young people of Christchurch, given you're both pretty experienced, a bit older? What is it that an 18-year-old who's voting for the first time can get excited about with your policies, Phil Major?
Well, main thing I'm doing, I'm running for mayor because I want to regain people's trust in council and get stuff done. Only 42% of residents have faith in what we do. But I see the role as a mayor as being a civic leader for our city. My vision is to make Christchurch the best place to live, work, invest and play in New Zealand. And this requires a mayor who helps put Christchurch on the map, and Banks Peninsula for that matter, and work with anyone for the best outcomes for the city and Banks Peninsula.
But is there a specific policy there for younger people in Christchurch?
Yeah, make Christchurch a better place to live, work, invest and play. With all the new facilities we've got there, Christchurch is going to be the humming place to be.
David Meates, what is it that you would focus on for younger people in Christchurch?
The one thing that has come through loudly and clearly from every young person that I've met is the importance of climate change. And I think what is coming through loudly and clearly is for the younger generation, their frustration that we're not taking it seriously enough. And for Christchurch, they declared a climate emergency back in 2019. And what has been reflected back is actually, if this is a crisis, there's not an awful lot happening. And that's the number one issue that is really coming through from the younger generations.
And how would you go about meeting emissions targets, getting Christchurch to be net zero by 2050?
Well, I think Christchurch is well positioned to be a wee bit more ambitious than that and looking to become Christchurch's first carbon neutral city. The city with its Waitakere Red Zone as a 600 hectares of land that has become part of the city as a result of the earthquakes is an area that has been consulted on widely through the city, and it has got a plan that just needs to be brought to life, and not brought to life over the next 30 years. How does that help with climate change then?
In
terms of the ability to do a lot of regenerative planting, becoming part of a feature of the city in terms of a largely a national park or equivalent in the city centre.
Phil Major, what's one thing you would do to reduce emissions?
Well, one of the things that I'm very pleased that's happened, and I'm fully behind, is ECAN have jumped on board and decided to do $2 bus fares. If you want to go for 1 kilometre or 200 kilometres, it's just $2, and if you're under 25, it's $1. So that is going to get people onto bus. We've got to change the way people think and get them to use a different kind of transport.
Okay, let's stay with the youth theme, if I may. In a roundabout way, I want to talk about housing density and this decision by the council, and I see you've both loosely supported it, to not support the government's plans to intensify housing under the RMA. Why? David Meates, first, why don't you support greater housing intensity when we've had this debate for the last 15, 20 years? We've got bipartisan support that says more infill housing in cities.
Intensification absolutely needs to happen in Christchurch, and I don't think there's any doubt about that. The issue that with the current proposed approach to intensification is likely to result in a scattergun approach to intensification across the city, and there are some parts of the city that absolutely make sense to be intensified. And I think what as a city we need is to do that in a really planned and deliberate way, not just a random approach taken across the across the city.
Wanting houses, affordable houses, have heard these excuses for 15 or 20 years. They just want to see more houses.
Yeah, they do want to see more houses, but we also need to be careful too that we don't continue just to become a sprawling city. So we do need to go upwards. But at the moment, we're doing it in a way that's being done really randomly, and that is not resonating with the community as a whole.
Phil Major, your view, you're opposed to this as well?
I'm just opposed mainly for the way government has thrown down an Auckland and a Wellington problem on us. After the earthquake, I was told we were never going to build anything tall again, but things have changed, and as David said, there are parts of the city that do need to be intensified, the central city, for example, and close to busy routes that go in and out of the city. But the main thing that I'm getting pushback on is this 3 stories high, three on three. People buy out in the suburbs because they want a section that their grandkids can play on out in the backyard or grow some vegetables like they were when they were brought up.
That just sounds to some like you're just pulling up the ladder behind you.
Oh, no. In the middle of town, we have got 10,000 people living in town. The aim was 20,000 people by 2030. 2030. We've got 10,000 there already, and the houses that are the intensified houses that are getting built at the moment are getting snapped up as soon as they're finished.
The issue here, David Meates, is that why should people trust the councils? This is, as I say, this has been a debate, a problem for many, many years in New Zealand. We finally have bipartisan support on this proposal. National supports this as well, very keen on it. Why should we trust that? They're basically saying they don't trust these big cities to do it, that you won't do it.
Look, I think there's a plan that has been developed within the city that has got largely broad support. And this is not an issue about people being anti-intensification. It is more about the approach and how it's going to happen.
Phil Major, just on this one before we move on, what happens if you push on with this and the government pushes back and threatens putting in a commissioner? I mean, this is a law. You have to comply with this law.
That's correct. That was one of the things that was pointed out to us loud and clear when we voted on this, that could have been an end result. A commissioner could come down and hit us with a big stick. But the main thing I feel is to go out to Wellington. Leanne has written a letter to Minister Parker, and which I totally agree with. And if elected, one of the first things I'll do is head up to Wellington and see if we can find a solution that increases Christchurch's housing with a more planned and thought out way.
But will you back down if mayor on this?
No. There's 17 residents groups. We have to work with the government to get a good result, but they could come down and hit us hard if they wanted to. But we've got to work with them to get the best result.
David Meates, if you're mayor, would you back down in the face of the government if they threatened a commissioner?
No, I think the challenge is actually rebuilding the relationships with central government, and we do need to find a solution that is going to work for city and for Christchurch that makes sense to the city.
All right, let's get to some nuts and bolts stuff. Rate increases. Phil Major, you're saying you would have rates running at less than the current annual plan, right, between 3 and 4.5%. How would you do that without cutting services?
When we first did our long-term plan when I did my first long-term plan 3 years ago, we started off with every capital project was on the list, and we went down, we were trying to save $39 million. After the first day we got to $39 million, we'd chopped a lot of stuff out, things that weren't that necessary. And I thought, wow, we're just getting into the swing of it now, but we got to that magical number and we decided not to go any further. There are a number of things, not lots, there are a number of things that we can still trim out of there that aren't necessary at the moment. One day there will be, but that's where we can go down the budget line by line and make savings.
You make savings, but you also, I see you were quoted recently saying that you would propose a loan to help the old Ducks Deluxe bar, I think I might have had the odd Blue Duck draft there in my time, be rebuilt. Why, if you're going through line by line, would you be supporting a bar?
One of the things that is integral to the part of in the middle of Christchurch, the Arts Centre did a fantastic job in rebuilding their whole setup, and then they ran out of money. The only bit that's not done in that whole square is the Ducks Deluxe, and it's not a grant, it's just a loan that they would pay
cheap loan. You'd be providing a cheap loan to a business organisation to run a bar. How does that fit with your idea of cutting back and running a prudent ship?
Oh, not necessarily a commercial loan. It would be a loan to it could be to that business, or it could be to the arts centre like we have in the past, and they look after it. The main thing is to get the thing repaired and finished so that everyone can enjoy it for Christchurch.
David Meates, I'm sure you've enjoyed the Ducks Deluxe in the past. Would you go that far?
Look, as a city, the city has just signed off on a $680 million stadium. And we cannot continue to be adding more and more projects to the list of priorities, because there is no way in the world that we're going to be able to just continue to rely on rates. And I think anyone that's indicating that a reduction in rates or other mechanisms like that is not going to be able to do that without cutting services significantly. And we've got to be really careful. We're not prioritising pet projects against other needs across the city.
So you wouldn't do the Ducks Deluxe rebuild?
That needs to sit within a priority against other challenges across the city. And things like out the eastern part of the city, there is a lot of issues and challenges that are still needing to be addressed, and we've got to be careful we're not deprioritising those.
Well, let me stay with you, David Meates. I want an answer on this one. How would you find the extra money for the stadium?
We've got a beggar's belief that after up until 2 months ago, conversations hadn't been had with neighbouring councils, and the Christchurch Stadium was always going to be a regional stadium, and so really that option and choice of other councils contributing to the capital is almost gone.
Well,
so,
would you try and make those other councils? But they're going to use it. People who live in those suburbs out in those other areas are going to use it, right? So should they pay?
So we're likely to be able to get contribution to the operating costs, but in terms of the capital costs, it's probably too far down the track. But I do think we're needing to look at how we're using some of the assets, leveraging off some of the other assets of the city, to look at actually using some of the balance sheets to look at how we might support some of the funding for a long-term capital.
Well, you haven't been very specific on that, whereas at least Phil Mauger has said he would sell some bits of land to help pay for it. Is that right, Phil?
Yeah, we've got. I wouldn't sell the family silver. Excuse me. Wouldn't sell the family silver, which is our Christchurch companies. But we've got stuff in the bottom cupboard that we've owned since 1918, which we don't even get the money for the grazing of it that we pay ourselves for rates on. So there's stuff like that we've collected over the years that. Not really that necessary, but repurpose our money. Like when I in my old company, if I bought a new digger, I'd sell the old one as a trade-in. So you don't just keep collecting stuff for the rest of your life.
Would you try and make those other councils in the region contribute to the capital costs of the stadium, because their ratepayers will get the benefit of it?
Absolutely, and I think we should sell, just like the Canterbury Museum, we should look at this as not the Canterbury Stadium, it's the Canterbury Multi-Use Arena, and if we spread it out around all of the people in Canterbury, the more people we spread it out around, the smaller the amount of money that will have to be put in.
All right, I've got to get to cycleways, because this seems to be an issue that's very dominant in Christchurch. Phil Mauger, you say you support cycleways, but you also want to do them cheaper. What is your position on the future of some of these big cycleways that need to be built with a lot of, I should say, government money too?
Yes, no, we're very lucky. The government have put a lot of money at it, especially shovel-ready stuff. In the last round, it was $82 million, and I thank them very much for that, because our ratepayers haven't had to pay for it. But we could go a lot further with that money in particular to the way we're building them. All a cyclist wants to do is be safe and ride on something smooth. But some of the way that we're designing them, in my previous life as a contractor, I can see how we could do it. Go a lot further with the money we've got.
Would all of those cycleways that are planned be built under you as mayor?
They're not in the way they're designed.
That sounds like a no.
No, not in the way they're designed at the moment. I'd look at doing them more cost effective.
But they'd all be there or not?
Yeah, they should all be there. The ones
every single one that is planned will be done.
Maybe not every single one. How's that, Greg?
Which one?
I don't know. I don't know which ones, but
the people of Christchurch might want to know that.
No, generally they need to be completed because they're in the plan and they're going to happen. But we've got to look at how we can make the dollar stretch further to maybe even get more of them done than just the ones that we've got budgeted.
Okay, David Meates, your view on the cycleways is that, do you agree that they can be done somehow cheaper but still as safe?
I think there's a lot of rhetoric around that the term over-engineered cycleways, what's often not understood is actually the cycleways are a catalyst for redoing curbs, intersections, and a whole range of other things that actually benefit motorists as well. And I think, to be really clear, the cycleways are contributing or costing ratepayers 0.07% on their rates. So I do think we just need to get on and do them, but in a way that actually communities are engaged and involved in the design and how they come to life.
Three Waters. Now, I want an answer from both of you on this and the issue of co-management and the governance boards, the 50-50 split with iwi. That part of Three Waters, do you both support that? David, you first.
Thanks.
Look, co-governance has existed across the country for many years. I think the way that this has been approached in Three Waters has now become a really loaded, kind of a loaded term and a loaded conversation. And I think we need to go back and make sure that we're understanding.
No, I think it's reasonable to ask, because I'm trying to get a sense of the issue. I know that the council's got issues with Three Waters in general, but I want to know whether you support the governance structure of the 50-50 iwi.
I think in the way that it's been approached and presented to the communities, it's not making sense.
Phil Major, what is your view?
We have an extremely good, the City Council has an extremely good relationship with Mana Whenua, and I want to continue doing that. So
does it? I'll get to that in a second, but I want to ask you I want a specific answer on the 50-50 split of the governance board.
Yes.
You support that?
Mm.
But do you in fact have a good relationship with iwi? Because I see you've had to roll back on your alternative Three Waters plan because you didn't consult with them about joining that separate group.
That's correct. I voted for a starter to join the separate group along with 32 other councils, and everyone gave them the money, and C4LD, Communities for Local Democracy, went and did their submission to the select committee, and they did a fantastic job and did everything that we ever asked them for. But it was time to go back to to our runanga and our Mana Whenua and build that relationship again, because going forward we've got a lot of things coming to council that we're going to need to be in the same tent together with.
Phil Major and David Meates, time has flown by, but thank you very much and good luck with the mayoral race. That is the two top contenders for the Christchurch City mayoral campaign. It is now just coming up towards